A word of deep appreciation to Sister Sue again for her marvelous morning meditations. I said to her this morning before the program began, in my own heart, what a sad thing it is that women are not allowed to have full voice within her church tradition, because the church is missing out on so many wonderful gifts. And I just thank God that there are these occasions when the voices of those who are often unable to preach at home are free to preach in other homes. And we thank God for you. Very grateful to Peter and others on the planning committee for inviting me to come and be a part of these 3 days, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. And thanks to all of the people who have helped to get my wife and me back and forth from one place to another. Thanks to Caroline for her wonderful leadership, to Steve for marvelous ministries of music and commentary, and Mark Buchanan for all of his contributions, and for all of you who have been here and been a part of these proceedings. It's just an enriching opportunity for me to share with you. I have to go back to the United States and live out the last few days of our election process.
You can always come back November 9th.
I may, depending upon the outcome. But the grace of the Lord be with us all as we go forward. Okay, let us pray. God, how thankful we are for these moments and hours and days when we who have given our lives, heart, mind, body, soul, to your service and to the service of your church and to the service of your people, how grateful we are that we can be together to be strengthened and nourished and challenged and renewed to go back to the work to which you've called us. Preachers, teachers, active laypersons, musicians, concerned people about our common humanity. Help us seize upon these times together to draw strength from the vine, that the branches may be nourished. We pray this in the name of Jesus and for his sake. Amen. Well, this presentation is based upon the book Be My Witness, the Great Commission for Preachers, and it is not based upon Matthew 28. It is not based upon the Great Commission in that version. It is instead based upon Acts 1, 6 through 8, which are the verses that we were talking about last night. And it deals with the question that came from the disciples, which we reflected on last evening. Lord, will you at this time restore again the kingdom to Israel? And then it goes into what Jesus says to them in response to their question. So the Great Commission that is at the root of this book is not that, but it is this: be my witness. Don't ask me what I'm going to do next. Let me challenge you about what I want you to do next. And the premise of this book is that whatever it was that Jesus said to the first disciples probably still has currency for those of us who are doing ministry in the 21st century. 2,000 years later, I do not think the message or the mission has changed one iota. So you say to Jesus, what do you want from me? What can I do in your name? Where do you want me to go? How do you want me to serve? 3 words. Be my witness. So what the book does, and what we're going to do today, is we're going to take a look at the word witness in 3 separate categories. First of all, a witness is someone who sees something. I want to come back to that. A witness is someone who says something about what they have seen. And then a witness is someone who is prepared to suffer something based upon the Greek word for witness, martyria. So you've seen something. Maybe you've been paying attention. Do you now have the courage to go from what you have seen, the injustice you have seen, the cruelty you have seen, the inequity you have seen, the godlessness that you have seen, whatever it is that you have been seeing, do you have the courage to go from the seeing to, now what am I going to say about what I have seen, knowing full well that the moment I say it, the moment I reveal my position on this issue, I expose myself to the possibility of having to suffer something. So think about what Paul does in Romans. When Paul says, if you confess with your mouth the Lord Jesus and believe in your heart that God has raised him from the dead, you shall be saved. Now that's a strange structure because he could have inverted that. If you confess with your mouth that he has been raised from the dead and believe in your heart that he is Lord, you can be saved. But he did not say that. He said, in Rome, where Caesar is Lord, in the Roman Empire, where lordship, power, and authority belong to Caesar, I want to know whether or not you have the courage to say with your mouth out loud for someone else to hear you that Christ is Lord. What you believe in your heart is one thing. What you say from your lips is what can get you into trouble. So seeing something, saying something, and then knowing that inevitably there is going to be the possibility that you'll have to suffer for something. So let's go back and sort of walk our way through this. Seeing something. A witness is someone, so I'm just using these words sort of based upon a gradual expansion of the notion of being a witness. The first thing that a witness does is sees. So it is an invitation to look around you, to look in the places where you traffic, to look in the places where you move, and just take an inventory. What do you see? Who are the people that you see? What are the problems that you see? What are the issues that you see? So I'm just, listing a few in my own context. So urban violence. Urban violence driven either by black-on-black crime or driven by Black Lives Matter and those persons who are being hurt and hindered by the intervention of law enforcement. God knows that there's endless political squabbling. I'm not trying to find who is right and who is wrong. I'm almost trying to find who is sane. I'm just trying to find somebody who's got something to say, the same thing today that you said yesterday, that has a vision that is broad enough to include all of us. I'm so frustrated in the American political process that every discussion begins with the middle class. If we can expand the middle class, if we can get more people into the middle class, I haven't heard anybody say a word about poverty and the things that contribute to it and the things that obstruct the path to the middle class. So the political, what do you see? What do you see in your own country, in your own neighborhood, right across the street from your church, right across the street from your place of residence? What do you see? Do you have wealth disparities in Canada? Do you see more and more money gravitating toward fewer and fewer people, more and more people who have less and less? And by the way, as that wealth disparity increases, so does the accumulation of political power and policies that affect everybody else. In the United States, we have CEOs of corporations like CVS and Starbucks and McDonald's who earn 1,000 times more than their workers, who make in an hour what their employees make in 6 months. But those people who have that level of wealth and influence also establish policies for maternity leave and for workplace safety and all the other things. So all the money, all the wealth, all the power, all the influence gets nestled in the hands of fewer and fewer people, and they are the ones who determine how the rest of us have to live. Just see it. Don't say anything yet. Don't say anything yet. Just sit with Ezekiel for 7 days. Just be set down by the river and see it. What do you see? You can't be a witness if you haven't seen what's happening in the lives of people. Mass incarceration of people of color. There are 2 million people in prison in my country. It costs $24,000 a year to keep each one of them there. It costs $5,000 a year for a drug rehabilitation program. 75% of the people in prison are in prison because of drug-related activities. We could, for 1/5 of the cost, remedy the problem instead of spending $25,000 to keep them there, and they come out more proficient in their activities than rehabilitated from them. It costs, in most state universities, $8,000 a year to go to Ohio State, Penn State. It costs 3 times more to go to the state prisons in those states. But do you see that? Or because it doesn't affect us, because nobody in our family is involved, can we just look past that and only see those things that impact us directly? And if they impact somebody else, gee, I'm so sorry. Not if you are a witness. Here's a little story that I want to share with you from one of my favorite cartoon characters. I think you can get a lot of sermons if you read the cartoons, at least the ones I read. So I'm reading Garfield. Do you have Garfield? Okay. So I'm reading Garfield, and this is a Sunday edition, and you know, on Sundays Garfield is 6 panels. It's 3 other days, but on Sunday they really stretch it out. This is the Sunday before Thanksgiving, 3 or 4 years ago. Garfield the cat is sitting at a table by himself having a Thanksgiving feast. I mean, turkey, goblets, bread, you know, everything. And the artist puts the sign of aroma coming up from the table. So it's just wonderful. But it's just Garfield. First panel. Second panel, it's Odie the dog. In the backyard, outside, in the snow, with an empty water bowl and an empty food bowl. Third panel. You're still looking at Odie, but now there's an outside look into the house for purposes of contrast. There's Garfield inside, feasting alone. There's Odie outside, nearly freezing and hungry. Fourth panel, back inside. Garfield is now looking out, so there's a big picture of Garfield and a smaller picture of Odie. So Garfield has suddenly seen Odie. Fifth panel. Garfield goes to the window. Hope springs eternal. Surely he is going to open the window and do one of two things: invite Odie in or hand the drumstick out. Which one or the other? Something's going to happen because he has seen Odie. Sixth panel. Garfield shuts the drapes, has gone back to his seat, and the artist has him saying, "That's better." He saw, but he didn't really see. What are you seeing? Just outside the window. Where is Odie in your life? In Luke 16, with the story of the rich man and Lazarus, where is Lazarus in your life? The people that the Lord wants us to see are not on the other side of the world, first of all. They are right outside, right across the street. But in our coming and our going and our rushing about to do the business of the Lord, we walk right past them. So the first thing we have to do is to see something. Garfield, and then my other favorite comic is Charlie Brown, Peanuts. So one day, Snoopy is outside, and he is covered in ice and snow. Icicles coming down his nose, coming down his ears, and he has the letters B-R-R-R-R coming out of his head. He's just freezing. Here comes Charlie Brown. He's wearing a hat, a coat, a scarf, boots, gloves. He is so insulated. He has heat rays coming out of his head. Here's the contrast. Versus heat. Charlie Brown sees Snoopy, and he says to Snoopy, "Be warm." And walks on. He still has his boots, still has his hat, still has his scarf, still has his gloves, still has his coat, but now in the final panel, there's a question mark over Snoopy's head. How do you, when you are freezing, be warm? And why didn't you, as you walk by me, at least give me one glove? The scarf, maybe, a boot, something, except this pious encouragement. Book of James. Be warm. First thing that Jesus says is, I want you to see something. I think Sister Sue's point today is so important. You're not going to see if you're rushing. You got to walk a little slower to see. You got to sit for a while to see it, to really enter into what's going wrong in the lives of others. Excuse me, I want to go back. This funny little story is told about this little boy who was asked the question, what is the difference, he was asked, between ignorance and apathy? His answer was, I don't know and I don't care. So which is it for us? Ignorance, I don't know. Apathy, I don't care. Except that the Peruvian theologian Gustavo Gutierrez says it is no longer possible to say, I don't know. The faces of the people in need are so obvious everywhere we turn. We cannot say, I don't know. Thus, all we can say is, I don't care. That to Jesus, who is inviting us to be his witness. Okay, so you've seen something. Now comes the next question. I will suggest to you that this gets progressively harder. It is hard enough to see, to pay attention to something beyond yourself, beyond your congregation, beyond your family needs. It's hard to focus in on what's happening in somebody else's life. But presuming that we can do that first thing, see something, now we come to the second understanding of what it means to be a witness, which takes us to a courtroom setting. What does a witness in a courtroom swear to do? I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. I don't swear to give, sort of offhanded comments or irrelevant observations. I have taken an oath to tell the truth about something. I think that what Jesus is inviting us to do is to find the courage in our preaching to be sure, week after week, month after month, year after year, that what we are saying is passing the truth test. Not just the orthodoxy test. Not is this faithful theological discussion, but is it saying a true word about what I have just seen? Or have I seen it, but it doesn't affect my sermon design at all? Yes, there is hunger. Yes, there is poverty. Yes, there is discrimination of every form. Yes, but I must preach this sermon on stewardship. I knew people in the United States on 9/11 and the Sunday after who were so locked into the lectionary that it didn't matter that 2 planes had crashed into the World Trade Center, another plane crashed in the Pentagon, and one more crashed in a field in Pennsylvania. They preached the text as if nothing had happened. Nothing. They didn't tell the truth about anything. And then in subsequent weeks, when all of this Patriot Act business started and all of these Sikhs were being taken into custody because they were persons of interest, nothing. At what point does what you see compel you? Like Jeremiah. It's like a fire locked up in my bones. I just have to get this said. Now, I want to come down to this last bullet point right here. I want to introduce another Greek word, parrhesia. Parrhesia. Say it with me. Parrhesia. Say it again. Parrhesia. In Acts 4:13, and again in 29, and again in 31, people who had heard Peter and John preaching said they were amazed at the boldness of their speech. Parrhesia carries the sense of being prepared to say something without regard for the consequences it may bring on you. You may not like what I'm getting ready to say, but I'm going to say this. Parrhesia. Parrhesia is also found in classical Greek in Socrates. When Socrates is about to drink the hemlock before he is put to death, he says to people, the reason that I'm here because you have objected to my bold speech. You do not like what I have had to say. And so because of what I have said, you now want to put me to death. Okay, but I'm going to say what I have to say. What do you feel you have to say about what you have seen? Or can you see it and disconnect the seeing from the saying? If you are a witness for Jesus. Here's a book I hope you will take note of, Preaching from the Prophets by James Ward and Christine Ward. Wonderful book on how to incorporate prophetic preaching into your preaching schedule. They do not encourage you to do this every week. But there ought to come times when this is where you go. Here is their quote. See if this sounds either like you or more probably like the congregations that you are trying to move into a more engaged form of ministry. This is the quote: "The natural inclination of the Christian community," notice now it doesn't say of the Presbyterian Church or the Black Baptist conventions. This is all of us. The natural inclination of the Christian community, like all religious communities, is to adapt its witness of faith to its most immediate human needs. So our witness involves our congregations, our pews, our organ, our sanctuaries, our fellowship hall. We've just had the church painted, so we cannot have children's programs here because they will get fingerprints all over the church, and we cannot have that because we have to have the church spotless on Sunday for people who have manure on their boots. In doing so, says the wards, the community runs the risk of obscuring the wider dimensions of the gospel, particularly the wider implications of God's demand for righteousness and justice. So I have to ask myself, and in so doing ask you, where is most of my preaching? Is most of what I preach dealing with the immediate needs of congregational life? Or do I find myself sometimes compelled to go to these wider dimensions of righteousness and justice? So my friend of many years, Cleophas LaRue, who teaches at Princeton, wrote a book entitled The Heart of Black Preaching. If you've never seen that book, I would certainly recommend it to you, in which he says that there are what he calls 5 domains of experience. 5 categories out of which, based upon his reflections, African American preachers have tried to direct the focus of their preaching. The first one, he says, is personal piety. There's always the need for sermons that help people to develop spiritual formation, spiritual practices, prayer, Bible study, devotions, abiding in the vine, personal piety. Second, he says, there are times when the sermon is about the care of other souls. Somebody has died. You got to go see the family. Somebody was involved in an accident. You've got to go minister to their needs. Traumas occur. Pastors have to speak to the often unanticipated, but usually can be commonly expected tragedies that break in on our lives. So sometimes our job is to sing the song that Anthony had us singing yesterday. There is a balm in Gilead that makes the wounded whole. There is a balm in Gilead that heals the sin-sick soul. So, personal piety, care of the soul. I'm going to skip the third one, go to the fourth one. Community concerns, by which he means what are the things that are particularly unique to your community that may not translate to others? Why, for instance, this is the way I read this. Why do 5% of African American males in Rochester, New York, finish high school on time? That's not a problem for Toronto. I don't want to come to Toronto to blame you because 5% of our black male students graduate on time. That is a particular problem where I live. That is something that me and the students that we're training and the churches that we're trying to impact, I want them to ask themselves that question and what they can do about it. And then I say to you, what are the issues that may not translate even from province to province? They are your particular community concerns. And how does your preaching address those? The fifth one, fourth in this present order, for Cleophas LaRue, is the maintenance of the institutional church. Okay, you got to get volunteers. You got to pay the budget. You know, you got to have deacons and run programs. Why in so many churches are all of the Cub Scout and Boy Scout leaders women? Can't get a man to run to work with the Boy Scouts. My wife was the Cub Scout and the Boy Scout leader. Now, we had a son who was in the Boy Scouts, so she didn't mind being there, but think about that. The Boy Scouts couldn't get a man to be the Boy Scout leader. That's how do you maintain the church? Okay, so personal piety, care of the soul, community concerns, the maintenance of the institutional church, but right in the middle, Cleo sits social justice. On the one hand, you are dealing with individuals in stress. On the other hand, you are dealing with institutions, schools, and your own church. In the middle, in a brilliant stroke, in the middle, he puts this question of social justice. Please don't leave out of your preaching schedule something that makes room for these occasional intrusions into the wider implications of the gospel. Here's where the quote continues, still the wards. What is needed, therefore, says James and Christine Ward, is preaching that recovers these wider dimensions and illuminates the ways in which the community obscures them. They see them, but don't see. They know them, but they don't really know. See, but do not see. Hear, but do not hear. So here comes my friend Cornell. In his book, Democracy Matters, who introduces a concept that I hope you can work with. Cornell doesn't talk about prophetic preachers. He talks about prophetic beings. He shifts the work of prophetic utterance from the pulpit to every single person in the pew. Being a witness does not belong just to your clergy. Ephesians 4:11 through 14 and on says some are called to be apostles, some are called to be prophets, some are called to be evangelists, some are called to be pastors and teachers. Fine, we've all been called. To what end? For the building up of the body of Christ, so that through the ministry of those of us who do the preaching, those who are receiving it can be strengthened to go out and to be a witness. So, says Cornell in this book, Democracy Matters, prophetic beings have as their special aim two things. One, to shatter deliberate ignorance and willful blindness. Go back to the little boy, ignorance and apathy. This is a perfect overlay. Most ignorance is worked at. My mind is made up. Don't confuse it with the facts. You have to work to be ignorant when the truth is so obvious. And you have to work to not see. Willful, this is a wonderful phrase, willful blindness. I am compelling myself not to see this. I put blinders on my eyes. I don't want to see that. I know it's there. I know it's wrong. I know. But I refuse to see it, because if I really saw it, I might have to say something about it, and I don't want to. So he says, there is deliberate ignorance and there is willful blindness. To what? To the sufferings of others. That's what the blindness is. That's what the ignorance is. It is not ignorance of facts. I know the Pledge of Allegiance. I know the Star-Spangled Banner. I don't have any idea why in any country you have to sing your national anthem before a sporting event, after which folks just try to tear each other limb from limb. I don't get the point of that. Oh, Canada, and you sing the song, and they play hockey, and they bang each other into the boards in the name of Canada. Okay, well, that's fine. Oh, say can you see by the dawn's early light, and a linebacker does his best to take the quarterback's head off in the name of the Star-Spangled Banner. Okay. So Colin Kaepernick decides not to sing, not to stand, but to kneel during the Star-Spangled Banner. A single person's act of protest. Because for him, the charade of patriotism masks the reality of suffering. He doesn't know any other way to call attention to it from his position. He doesn't have a pulpit. He doesn't have a classroom. He doesn't have a teaching position. He doesn't occupy an endowed chair. All he has is his role as a football player, but because he's the quarterback, and all eyes are on the quarterback, in his kneeling to give voice to those who don't have any voice, he is bearing witness to the sufferings of others. Has he lost endorsements? Oh boy. Is he getting death threats? You bet. Has the team cut him? Absolutely not. He is in the line of African American athletes, and there are undoubtedly others, who turn their sports and athletic ability into opportunities to bear witness. The Olympic Games, where two of the African-American athletes who ran in the 440 got on the stage. One won the silver, one won the gold, and when they sang the national anthem, they raised their hands with a black glove. They had just won Olympic medals. They were trying to bear witness to the sufferings of others. Muhammad Ali, at the height of his career, heavyweight boxing champion of the world, decides that he doesn't have any quarrel with Vietnam because he says, nobody in Vietnam has called me a nigger lately. Why am I fighting for a country that doesn't even see my humanity? He didn't have a pulpit, he didn't have an endowed chair, all he had was a boxing ring and the decision how to bear witness to his convictions. Colin Kaepernick is right in that same succession. Here comes Cornell. We must stir up in us the courage to care. That's the first step. You've got to stir up in yourself. Now, why would he say the courage to care? Because it takes a lot of courage to enter the fray. You're safer on the sidelines if you don't want to get hurt. You have to stir up in yourself the courage to care and the will to take actions. First, you got to care. Then you have to act so that you can change lives and historical circumstances. Martin Luther King Jr. went to Montgomery in 1954 to finish his PhD dissertation on systematic theology, and he thought that Dexter Avenue Baptist Church was a nice, safe place to go to finish his PhD dissertation. And once he was finished with his PhD dissertation, he was fully expecting to go teach at Morehouse or Howard University, and he was getting offers from everywhere. I mean, how many black men had a PhD in systematic theology in 1955? But the historical circumstances caught up with him. The next thing you know, Rosa Parks sits down. And the next thing you know, Martin King stands up. And the next thing you know is martyria. If you see it, and you find the courage to say it, you automatically enter the realm of the possibility of some form of suffering. It doesn't always have to be death. It can just be the slow death of being ignored, of being denounced, of being excluded, of being talked about as someone who has radical views. But Jesus is saying to us, don't ask me what I'm going to do for you. This is what I want you to do for me. Be my witness. See something. Pay attention to the world around you. Then have the courage to say something about what you have seen, but buckle your seatbelt. Because the pushback will not be long in coming. So we come to one of any number of persons that we could name. But let's talk about Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Two PhDs. Who was in New York City in the 1930s at Union Theological Seminary, at my school. There's a room in Union called the Bonhoeffer Room. It begins with a picture of him in the classroom at Union. It ends with a picture of the Flausenberg concentration camp. Somewhere between the classroom in Union and the gallows at Flausenberg, Bonhoeffer made a decision that he had seen something about which he could not be silent. And so he joined a group called the Confessing Church. There were two churches in Germany in the 1930s. There was the sad conversion of the German Lutheran Church into a near replica of the Nazi propaganda machine. The cross was suddenly, strangely twisted into a swastika. Christ ceased to be Lord because allegiance was sworn in the German church to Hitler, but not in the Barmen Declaration. Please, if you haven't, read the 1934 Barmen, B-A-R-M-E-N, Barmen Declaration, and see what courage looks like. Or read the book, I think it's by Dale Stroud or someone Stroud. Anyway, it's called Preaching in Hitler's Shadow. For sure, the last name is Stroud, S-T-R-O-U-D. Sermons preached in Germany during the Third Reich by people who refused to give ultimate authority to Hitler. Jesus says, whoever seeks to save his life will lose it. Whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. That's a great, comforting verse until you have to run the risk of doing it. It's a golden verse. It's the memory verse in a Sunday school class until you have to make that decision. Martin King says, if a person has not found something worth dying for, they are not fit to live. What do we believe in enough to suffer for? I don't want to start with dying. What do we believe in enough to suffer any inconvenience, any loss of anything, because on this issue we will not compromise? Well, here's Reinhold Niebuhr sort of speaking a little truth to us about how hard the third step is. In his book, Leaves in the Notebook of a Tamed Cynic, Niebuhr writes, "I am not surprised that most prophets were itinerant. They came and they left, and somebody else dealt with the consequences thereof." He then says in the same book, many budding prophets over time become harmless parish priests. You start out on fire. Over time, the fire burns less and less intensely until finally, folks pretty much are assured that whatever you say on Sunday will be harmless. And the world leaves you alone because they now know that nothing that's going to be said in that church will in any way impact what we're doing in the secular world. You are just a harmless parish priest. I want to skip through these. You have to be a witness in Jerusalem. You have to be a witness in Judea. You have to be a witness in Samaria. I don't have time for all of those. That was my workshop yesterday. And you have to be a witness to the end of the earth. But you have to have this. We can't do this by ourselves. So Jesus says, before you do anything, do you want to know what I want you to do? I want you to be my witness in Jerusalem and Judea and Samaria and to the end of the earth, but don't go yet. You're not ready. Don't take your degree with you. Don't take your academic fellowship with you. That won't get you too far. The church will wear right through all of those credentials. That won't keep you. Abide in the vine. So here's a story. I'll stop with this. In 1956, I'm right at the bottom now, it's the last slide. In 1956, the Montgomery bus boycott was well underway. 2 days earlier, Martin King was at a meeting at the church of Ralph Abernathy, and a bomb was placed at the front door of his house, and it exploded. Inside the house was Coretta Scott King and their firstborn child, who was Yolanda. Yolanda was 3 months old when the bomb exploded. When Martin came home, he kept saying to himself, I cannot expose my family to this. His father called him from Atlanta and said, listen, leave there, come to Atlanta, we'll find a space for you. You don't owe these people your life. On this night, he couldn't sleep. Phone kept ringing. Awful, ugly threats were being uttered at the other end. Nigga, we're going to blow your house up, shoot your brains out. So he says that he got up and went to the kitchen and made the strongest pot of coffee that he could because he had to have a midnight talk with the Lord. He confessed to God that I cannot go on. His PhD from Boston is not getting me anywhere. I need more than that. He said, in that moment, when he confessed to God that he could not go on, he heard the lines of a hymn that said, I've seen the lightning flashing. I've heard the thunder roll. I felt sin breakers dashing, trying to conquer my soul. But I heard the voice of Jesus telling me still to fight on. He promised never to leave me, never to leave me alone. Go into all the world, preach the gospel to every creature, baptizing those who believe in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. And lo, I will be with you, even to the end of time. Thanks be to God.